to understand the family dynamics. So, Sky's mother was a woman named Julia Berdakova, and she was born in Russia but was a native of Ukraine. In 1994, she immigrated to the United States, and 3 years later, when she was just 15 years old, Julia met 21-year-old Solomon Metalwala, who was originally from Pakistan. Solomon was doing very well for himself. He was running this successful convenience store in Bellavue, Washington. He ends up inviting Julia to this party, and they begin dating shortly after that. Julia graduated from Bellavue High School in 1999, and this same year she became a naturalized U.S. citizen. Soon after she graduated from high school, she moved in with Solomon, so the two are living in this condo, and Julia is also working at the convenience store, so the couple is spending most of their time together. And the store was doing great. They were making really good money, and their lives were kind of perfect. They're young and in love. They don't have to worry about money. It was a really good situation. In 2003, Julia and Solomon got married in this very small ceremony, which actually took place in Solomon's mother's kitchen, so it was very small. In 2005, Solomon converted to Christianity, and I'm not really sure if Julia was religious at all, but his religion does get brought up later in this case. So things are going really well until about 2007, and this is when a new convenience store goes up nearby, and it really starts to affect Solomon's convenience store because now there's this newer, nicer store, and they lost a lot of their regular customers. So around the same time that the store really started to struggle, Julia gave birth to the couple's first child, a little girl who they named Maylee. So after the birth of the baby, Julia would stay home while Solomon spent most of his time working at the store. But shortly after Maylee was born, Julia began to exhibit some concerning behaviors. She obsessively cleaned. She was cleaning for hours, and this obsession to clean led to her neglecting the baby because in her mind it was more important that the baby live in a clean house is a major shift in her focus, and things kind of go back to normal. And then Julia gets pregnant again, and when she gets pregnant, she makes the choice to stop taking her medication. Now, I'm not sure if she was worried about how it would affect her unborn child, but her doctors really advised against her stopping cold turkey. So not only is her OCD back in full force during this pregnancy, but she also becomes very depressed. Sky Elijah Metalwala was born on September 6th, 2009. Now, by the time Sky was born, his mother had kind of reverted back to the vigorous cleaning. It's reported she would sometimes clean for 10 hours straight, and her husband was having to leave work, pick up both of the kids, and take them out of the home just so he could feed them, because feeding the kids was too messy. Julia would sometimes stay up till like 11 or 12 a.m. and clean the home. And Solomon wasn't even allowed to sleep in the bed because she would like make the bed perfectly and then make him sleep on the floor. In March of 2010, on Julia's 29th birthday, she was committed to a psychiatric hospital after she admitted to her husband that she sometimes thought about strangling their children. This would be one of 3 times that she would be committed to psychiatric hospitals. So, despite her situation and the history, her psychiatrist said that her condition would not affect the way that she parented her children. Now, I'm not sure how long this hospital stay was, but she was out by June of 2010, and on June 4th, Solomon filed for divorce. And this divorce got extremely bitter. Both Solomon and Julia attacked each other's characters, hoping they would get custody of the children. decision had kind of been made. Julia says that she was under pressure to agree to things that she really was uncomfortable with, and she totally calls off the agreement that they had made. So remember how they had sat in mediation for almost 13 hours? Well, at the time, nobody knew this, but Julia had left her children home all alone for 13 hours. A 4-year-old and a 2-year-old alone for 13 hours. And this is who the court is giving custody to. On November 6th, 2011, Sky wakes up and he's very sick. So sick, in fact, that Julia decides he needs to go to the hospital. So, around 8 a.m. that morning, she puts Maylee and Sky in her car, which was a silver 1998 Acura, and it actually was her brother's car, but she was borrowing it, and she heads to the hospital. On her way to Overland Medical Center, she runs out of gas. She tells authorities that Sky was in his car seat asleep, and she was only about a mile from a gas station, so she leaves the car on the side of the road with her 2-year-old in it asleep, and walks to the gas station with Maylee, leaving Sky behind. Now, Julia did not have a gas can with her, and she doesn't go to the gas station and buy one. In fact, when she gets to the gas station, she asks the attendant if she can use the phone, and she calls her friend because she doesn't have her phone or her purse with her. So, her friend comes to the gas station, picks her up, and then they drive back to the car. And at this point, about an hour has gone by, so according to her, Sky has been alone in the car for about an hour. When they get back, Sky is no longer in the car, so they call police. The 911 call comes in at 9:50 a.m. from Julia's friend's cell phone, and she reports her son missing. A 20-block radius around the car is searched. Police immediately bring in canines, trying to pick up Sky's scent, but they don't find his scent anywhere outside the car. Pretty much as soon as police arrive and begin questioning Julia, her story kind of crumbles. First of all, she tells police she ran out of gas, but police put the key in the ignition and the car starts. There was like 3 gallons still in her gas tank, and they end up taking her car to a mechanic to try to see if there was any kind of mechanical issues, but they could find nothing. Around 11 a.m., police notify Sky's father that he's missing, and it's kind of around this point that they're questioning neighbors, questioning family, that they realize that nobody has actually seen Sky for 2 weeks, other than his mother claiming that she had. I guess one of the last people to see Sky was a neighbor who said that Sky had been we never see her kids. So, the last time that someone who knew the family had seen Sky was 8 months earlier when he had gone to a doctor's appointment. This was like the last time that someone for sure had seen them, although this neighbor is pretty sure that she saw Sky 2 weeks ago. So police are trying to dig up any information about Julia, about Sky, and this is when they realize that this is not the first time that Julia has left Sky in a car unattended. When he was 2 months old, Julia and Solomon had gone to Target, and Sky had fallen asleep in the car, and so they had left him in there. The temperature that day was 27 degrees Fahrenheit, so it was cold outside, and they had gone into Target and had been shopping, and eventually someone walked by the car and noticed this child alone. So Target began paging the owners of the car, and they went outside and they were greeted by police, and CPS was involved, and both parents actually had to take some parenting classes after this, and I think they also had some community service that they had to do. So Julia allowed police to search her car, they searched her home, and they searched her computer, but she refused to cooperate as far as giving them a statement. She pleaded the fifth and refused to polygraph, refused to be interviewed. To this day, she has not officially done an interview with police and has not told anyone about the circumstances surrounding her son's disappearance. Now, Solomon did take a polygraph, and the results were inconclusive, and he took a follow-up polygraph, and the results of that were never released to the public. But as soon as he found out his son was missing, he was searching. He was trying to gather groups of people to go out and search. He was making flyers. He was doing interviews. He was doing everything he could to help find his son. Julia, on the other hand, never once went out and searched for her child. From the very beginning, Solomon claimed that his wife was responsible for Sky's disappearance. 1 week after Sky's disappearance, police set up this big roadblock and they stopped and questioned anyone who drove by to see if anyone had seen anything or had any information. Everyone really felt like Julia was guilty. She wasn't even trying to act not guilty. She refused to help police. She refused to help search for her child. And 2 weeks after Sky disappeared, she is emailing this news anchor from ABC, and she just says, "I have no idea what happened to Sky," but then she would not elaborate at all. In this email, she lashes out at Solomon, and she calls him, quote, "a sadistic Muslim Pakistani," end quote, which is interesting because he was extremely involved in Christianity at this point, going to church all the time. Shortly after Sky went missing, Maylee was removed from her mother's care and was placed into foster care. Julia was not allowed to have any contact with her daughter, and Maylee remained in foster care for about 3 months. And then in December, Solomon was granted full custody. It was obvious that Maylee had some severe trauma from living with her mother, and I think these kids were pretty isolated from everyone but Julia while she had custody. Julia constantly talked about killing herself in front of her children, and when Maylee was placed in foster care and then later in her father's care, she was 4 years old and she constantly talked about taking her own life. In March of 2012, Julia and Solomon's divorce was finalized. But in the meantime, Julia had gotten on seekingarrangements.com, and she was trying to find a sugar daddy who would take care of her. Now, there are a couple different theories in this case. Most people believe that Julia totally lied about everything that happened the morning Sky went missing. No one had seen him for at least 2 weeks, but it's possible up to 8 months. So it's very likely that he was never even in the car that morning. Investigators did try to question Maylee about this, and she said Sky was in the car, but Maylee was 4, and it's likely she was confused, or very possible that she had been coached by her mother. Solomon's lawyer does not think that Sky was ever in the car on November 6th. She's convinced that Julia is responsible for Sky's death. Now, no one's really sure if the boy was killed or if this was some kind of accident. He went too long between being fed and died of starvation or some other accident while his mother was compulsively cleaning. But either way, people believe that she got rid of the body. And she did spend hours and hours every day cleaning, so even though police searched the home, it is likely that she cleaned up the crime scene, if there was a crime scene, very, very well. There is another theory that originally was pushed very hard by Solomon, but he's kind of backed off of this a little. And this theory has to do with Julia's father. Now, shortly before Sky went missing, Julia's father was visiting from the Ukraine, and it is possible, or speculated at least, that he took the boy back to Ukraine with him. However, I do kind of think this is a more unlikely scenario. It's hard to take a child out of the country without raising any flags. To this day, there's really not a lot of evidence about Sky's case. As of November of 2019, 14,000 police hours and $2 million have gone into this case. Police have followed up on over 3,000 tips, but they're just coming up with nothing. The lack of progress in the case is obviously due to Julia's refusal to cooperate. I think Julia definitely holds the key to solving this case. Now, CPS referrals in Florida for cruelty toward children that he had with other women. He also has charges of violence against police officers, domestic violence, assault, chemical dependency, assault, and battery. In 2015, Julia gave birth to a baby that she had with Morgan, and shortly after the baby was born, CPS was notified that this newborn was likely in danger due to Julia's past. So the state came in and took the baby. Right around the time the baby was born, the father was arrested for domestic assault, and the state issued a no-contact order and gave the baby to Julia's mother, who I believe is still raising the child. Maylee is now a teenager. She lives with her father, and she's doing very well. Her father describes her as smart, adventurous, and engaged. While Maylee did have a lot of fear and emotional trauma inflicted on her by her mother, she's really gotten the help she needs and is really thriving now. In 2014, Solomon told the Seattle Times that Maylee had no memory of the day that her brother disappeared, and Solomon is still holding out hope that Sky is out there and alive, and that he'll get to see him again someday. Here is a picture of Sky along with an age-progressed photo. If you have any information about the disappearance of Sky, please contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST. I just quickly want to cite my sources. I got a lot of information from a blog called Talk Murder With Me. They had an article titled The Disappearance of Sky Metalwala, a CBS News article titled Missing Washington Toddler Sky Metalwala, a Wikipedia page, and a page on the Charlie Project about Sky. I want to know what you guys think. As always, unfortunately, I do feel like this is a very open and shut case. I think his mom did something, whether intentionally or it was just neglect. She definitely is to blame here. Hopefully, police will find a body or will find something and be able to charge this woman, because she's just out there living her life, and that is horrific considering. Anyways, as always, let me know what you guys think, and thank you for joining me.